Ms. Boyce-Taylor or Ms. Cheryl, how do you prefer to be addressed as we go through tonight?
Well, you can call me Cheryl or Mama Phife.
Mama Phife, if I may. Thank you so much. My first question I think that I would love to start our session with tonight really is, aside from the great loss, of course, that one experiences when we're creating art for someone, what was the onus, right? Like, what was the motivation in creating what we felt as a group, which was like an archive of your love for your son? Why not just the book or just stories? It seems like you've used so many different mediums to create this piece. And we just wanted to kind of know what was the motivation behind making it more than just perhaps a literary book?
Well, when I first began writing it, it was not a book. I had the most tremendous loss of my life, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I was losing touch with reality, with friends. I could not remember who was at the funeral, who called me, what they said. And my greatest fear was that I was going to forget my life with Malik. So as 2016 drew to an end, I was afraid the holidays will come, the year would end, and that would be it. So I began writing notes to my mother, notes to myself, letters to Malik, letters to God, or anyone out there that would answer. I really started it as a journal to hold memory. And that's what it was, a journal. It turned into something very different, because one of the things that I wanted was to honor Malik, and also for people, a lot of people knew who Phife Dawg was, but they did not know who Malik was, and how this little boy from Jamaica, Queens, this little Trinidadian boy dreamt big dreams and worked his way into getting them and changing the world of music. So that was the thing that I wanted. I wanted to also leave a message that honored him and honored my grandson and his wife. So it was a family thing. I wanted to put all the pieces together. And I loved his childhood because I loved his spunk, and he said all this. And when he was 12 years old, he was looking for a posse, looking for beats, writing poems and hip hop lyrics. And so I felt that that was so awesome and beautiful. I wanted it to be memorialized somewhere.
Thank you so much. And I want to name that if you were able to talk a little bit more about his childhood in particular, because I think that was something that stood out to us as readers in a group, particularly specifically naming being Black and having Caribbean roots, and knowing that the expectation is more than artistry, right? The expectation is to become something sustainable, something that makes the family grounded. And we spoke a lot in book club about how, wow, as people with Caribbean parents or Caribbean backgrounds, I don't know if parents would have been as supportive or as willing to ensure that their child was an artist. And it really seems like it's something that you've done. Can you talk to us a little bit more about sort of your parenting around that time? Or
Yeah, well, I was an artist. So I understood that art was going to be part of what he enjoyed and what he did. In those years, I was doing a lot of readings in people's backyard, on their front lawn, at the end of the block. And I would tell him, you have to write a poem and open this event for us. So he would just go ahead and write it and do it. And he was like so happy to do it. But my undergraduate degree from York College was in speech and theater. And often I took him to the theater with me because, you know, if you're in theater, you know that the rehearsals can go long and unexpected. I didn't always have a sitter, so I took him there. He played a lot. He met one of his dearest friends there who remained his best friend till his death. He was 5. And so he would go playing, and then I would say, okay, come and sit now and write something, which he did. He saw me on the stage. He saw me memorizing things. And then I saw in his 3rd grade yearbook, when they asked them, each child, what they wanted to be when they grew up, he said, an actor and in the arts, or an actor and an artist, something like that. So I was happy to see that writing was in his blood. Of course, my mother, who is from Trinidad, would memorize long poems and recite them. So she recited poems throughout the house with this melodious, lovely voice that she had. She read poems to myself and Malik at bedtime. And so he really got it naturally. It really was in his blood. Plus, I liked the ideas that he had for himself. They were so bright and positive that I supported him in it. And also one other thing was that his dad and I divorced when he was 13. And I saw such sadness come into his life. But hip hop really changed that for him. And so when he told me he was going to be a hip hop artist, I didn't say no. I encouraged him to just be honest and work very hard and always be on time, and all those things.
Yes, of course. That last, wow, thank you. I feel like I'm learning so much. That last tidbit is really interesting to me because I think oftentimes, particularly Tribe Called Quest and Phife in particular are groundbreaking hip hop iconic artists. So when we think about where hip hop even was at that time, and if it was an art form or not, was still into consideration. So my question for you is, clearly in some way you were able to recognize, right, that alignment between poetry and hip hop and allow it to be something that you supported your son in? Because I feel like most parents would say, hip hop, rapping, why can't you be a writer or be a poet? And can you talk a little bit about what you think those connections between hip hop and poetry are?
Well, he was being a poet. He was being a writer. He was being a lyricist, and he was being a musician, as well as he was following the griot tradition of telling stories and stories with music. So I saw him as a poet that told his stories with music. Absolutely. and with a lot of sass and vim and vigor, and he was a hottie. I mean, verbally he was a hottie.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I feel like, wow, we're getting a lot of gems off the bat. We're all shook over here. We're like, well, this is amazing. I'm gonna give myself an opportunity to stop speaking and maybe open it up to the group. Miss Boyce-Taylor, if there's anything you want to share before I open it up to the group, is there anything that we're hearing so far that folks want to chime in on or ask?
One of the, Cheryl and I was speaking earlier, and one of the things I was kind of struck by was how open you were as products of Caribbean households. We don't think of tradition, and this could be a stereotype that I'm only perpetuating, that we don't think of parent-children relationships as ones that are open to children entering the arts. Now, people from the Caribbean have a long history of, artistic production. So to a certain extent, that is a stereotype. But when you think about our parents, they always want you to get that kind of safe and secure job. And was there ever a time when you felt that? I know you're the main driver behind who Phife is or became, but was there ever a time, as your mother did to you, try to tell Phife, go to college, get a degree, in economics and, you know, live your life, live a good life, as opposed to becoming a rapper.
Yes, when he was a sophomore in high school, and I saw that he was getting more and more into this rap business. And in my house, his dad and I had many rules, but one important rule was the same rule the two of us grew up with, was that you have to work, you have to go to school. You must do one of those things. And then if you don't, you can't be living here. So, and I want to talk to you all because I heard that first discussion about the spankings, and I came to talk about that too. So that was the rule in our homes in those years, in the 60s and 70s. So when he told me that he was leaving school to go on tour, I told him, no, I want to send you to college. I'm going to pay for it. I don't even expect you to work. And he was like, I don't want college. He said, I have my whole life to go to college. So I'm going to do this here with my rap and my hip hop, and then there'll be room for college. And he was always like that. He would say, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. I mean, sometimes that didn't work, but he was always like that. And he said, Mom, I'm telling you, I'm not, I want to go on tour with a Tribe Called Quest. He said, you said I had to work or be in school. I'm not being in school, so I'm going to work. So what could I say? He was about 16. I trusted him because he was a good young man and Christian, very spiritual, prayed before every meal. And this was to the end of his life. So he had a lot of good qualities, and I knew that he would either make it or not. And if he didn't make it, home was always open for him to come back to. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I guess the other thing was that when I grew up with my mother, she was one of the leaders in the church. And so she always made my brother and I read poems, sing a song for whatever the occasion was at church. And that is how I grew up. And so we just did the same with Malik. That was part of the Caribbean culture.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like that is the particular difference, right, Ron, that I feel like we were talking about in the previous weeks around how it's just not centered mostly in Caribbean families. Even given the culture, there's an expectation.
And I want to talk a little bit about the spanking, because I know I heard people saying, I think they said whoopings, or I can't remember the terms that they used, but spanking meaning a tap on the butt, speaking very sternly, limits, absolute limits. He could talk about anything in our house. He couldn't be rude, he couldn't curse, he couldn't be threatening to us or his grandmother. That just was not part of it. And we were spanked. I mean, I began working for ACS once I finished my degree in social work and learned that spankings was not a good thing. And once I learned that, I just stopped it. I still had limits and rules and regulations, but I was not speaking beatings. I would never beat my child, but I did spank him a couple of times, like I was spanked, and like his dad was spanked, and my brother and our cousins, it was how they gave you limits.
And I think it's interesting to note, even within those limits, it didn't seem to stifle any sort of communication that he was able to have with you as a child. Like, it seems like he was able to say what was on his mind when he needed to say it and how he chose to say it. So thank you for sharing that with us.
And to be honest, we fought, we argued. I was like, no, you're not doing that. No, you're not leaving this house. We had those moments. It's not that, you know, it was one long joyous road, but my dad was also very light with me. It was not a big deal. My dad never hit me. And now my mother was way more strict, but my father, oh, he just said, be quiet, stop talking now. When I would be like, blah, 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 blah.
Right. And we all, it seems that, you know, when we have children, we move in legacy, we expand beyond just our experience, right? Like we're able to provide something greater. So thank you for being so honest and naming that. Like, I really appreciate that in our space. This is a literary space, but it's also a community space. You know, parents, we've got, I'm sure folks here have experienced that, and a lot of us understanding Caribbean culture as well. And in Black and Brown body, like I don't think spanking is unfamiliar, at least to anyone while we're reading the books. I think what's unfamiliar is how open you are about it, right? Like that is what's unfamiliar. I think most when we think about Caribbean culture, there's this sense of, oh, I did what I had to do. And I hear you naming, actually, I learned and I changed and I learned things later on. So that's amazing. Yeah. I'm sorry, it's kind of loud where I'm at. I hope everyone can hear me. With that being said, I want to shout out to Liliana. Liliana! Y'all know I make sound effects. Don't be so serious while we're here. Liliana wrote an amazing question in the chat. Liliana, would you like a chance to read it or do you want me to read it? I don't even see, oh, okay. I think I'm gonna read it because Liliana seems busy. So Liliana said, thank you so much for joining our space tonight. My question is regarding, I guess, the poem Apricot Begonias. Did going to Mexico City provide a sense of hope or renewal for you?
It was such a hard time in my life. However, I am a big Frida Kahlo fan. When I had my house in Liberty, I had a Frida Kahlo room. EJ can tell you, she's been there. So, although I was sad and I mean, really not myself, I always wanted to go visit Frida Kahlo's house in Coyoacán, the Blue House. So it was with heaviness and sadness, but also with a lot of excitement to be going to Frida's home. And my friend who took me, we said it was going to be a pilgrimage. So in a way, I was going there to get some renewal. Now, Frida Kahlo has always inspired me with the sadness and the illness and all that she's been through and lived to paint it. And so that was the part that kept me going. I told myself, if Frida could get over the things she got over and keep doing her work, then I have to hold my son close, mourn him, but continue doing my work. And so, yes, it was something that lifted me.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful. Folks are just agreeing and telling you thank you for your inspiration. Barbara's naming that. I guess she has also seen Frida Kahlo's home. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna open it up now again. Anyone else have any questions? Anything sticking out to folks? Oh, Sherry, please.
Hi, Mama Phife. Very beautiful. Just a picture.
Thank you.
Encouragement. A couple of parts of the book that I read, I had to reread again because it touched my heart. I'm not a mother. However, I know I felt that. I felt it to my core, you know, just as if I were a mother. The one was, I guess the first time you were having your pacemaker checked and you said, F the pacemaker. You know, I could feel that because I don't care about anything right now. I felt that. Yeah. And then a second part that I loved was the birthday card to his father. And and mom, I just thought that was so I could just see that that's so precious.
Yeah.
Although it's a special day typically for men, that he loved you so much he gave you that shout out. I thought that was so precious.
Yeah, yeah, I love that too. It had to be in the book.
I found great joy in that, and again, the book just speaks to me so much, and I could just see my mother in that position and how she would feel, and just I just felt the emotion, and thank you so much for sharing this beautiful piece of work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Something that I thought that was really, really amazing as well is that you added Phife's discography in the back.
Yes.
Can you say why?
As I said, I was writing this book also for my friends, my adult friends. I was writing it for his friends that saw him grow up. I was writing it for my family in Trinidad so they could have that whole thing, which I don't think people knew how much work he did, and along with his very serious illness. He did a lot of work, and I have to say that he had been given a kidney by his wife. It takes a lot to prepare yourself for a kidney, and that kidney failed, and a few years later, he went back on the list for a kidney, and the year that he died, he had worked his way up to being number 7 on the kidney list, on the kidney transplant list. So when I tell you that when he was traveling and going back and forth from New York to California, he had his rough days, but nothing could stop him. He was here, he was doing dialysis, he was working on the Tribe album, he was working on his solo album that we have had a few singles from, and the album is coming out this year. I mean, he was working like an Energizer bunny and happy. That year, for his birthday, November 2015, there were 3 parties around the world for him, birthday parties, because he loved having birthday parties. So I just really wanted to share his discography. I wanted to share his history, his love for music, and his love for his fans. He loved his fans.
Thank you for making that connection. And I don't remember exactly how it came up in the book club. If someone remembers specifically, feel free to cut me off and jump in. I'm inviting y'all to cut me off and jump in. But pardon me, we had mentioned that given that it's such a serious illness to have to navigate, it's, the idea that he was still creating art and distributing and moving and celebrating and working not only on his project, but projects with groups and other projects. I think that that's a great connection to make, because often when we hear that someone gets sick, the narrative in our minds is that the work stops, but the work never stops, doesn't, particularly
No.
if you're creative. Yeah, I mean, am I saying it right, y'all? Cut me off. No. I think that was part of what we were naming that. How was he able to, I guess my question, or the question we were asking each other, and you'd be able to clarify, how did you see him navigating sort of, being sick and creating his work? What was that dichotomy like? Was there a dichotomy? Was it seamless? Like, what was that like?
Well, it wasn't seamless because it was rough, sometimes harder than other times. But I've seen him in the hospital bed, because he lived in California. And I've seen him on the hospital bed doing interviews, doing videos. It was just unbelievable. And sometimes he wouldn't even tell me how bad he was feeling. But I think many mothers have that sixth sense about their children.
Absolutely.
So I would hear his voice on the phone and I would be on the next plane. I didn't care if I had to work, not work. He was my priority. And for a period, I was taking care of my mother too. And I'm a type 1 diabetic for over 50 years. So it's not that it was so easy, but it was necessary.
Right. So basically the work doesn't stop.
The work doesn't stop. And I would say that if I could be so lucky to perform and put out books 2 weeks before my death, I will be grateful.
I definitely understand that sentiment. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Cheryl,
Yes.
just keeping along that line. How did Malik adjust when A Tribe Called Quest broke up? What did he do to keep himself going, and after that had happened?
Well, it was very hard for him when they broke up. Of course, they had been working since they were 13. He and Q-Tip. Ali joined them in high school, but they had been writing rhymes and everything since they were that young. And then Jerobi joined them. So when they broke up, and it was in a way where they had been having disagreements and things like that. The recording industry is very, very vile and vicious, and they do work to divide and conquer. So they were having some of those issues like that. And they had spoken about separating, but they had done an album. I think it's the Love Movement, that album. And they were talking about separating for a while, taking a break. And then Q-Tip dropped them a letter that he was leaving. So it wasn't respectful where they discussed it and each came to the decision. So Malik was mad. He was mad. That was his whole life. And so he made a solo album called Ventilation. And he did vent, and he did get it out of his system. But with everything, he really returned to his music. He had positive songs in there, but he was never afraid to cuss anybody. And, he says, microphone check 1, 2, what is this? The 5-foot assassin with the roughneck business. And he really had his roughneck business, and nothing could stop him from doing it. He also worked with other groups. He worked with TLC. He worked with a group called Fushnikins. He worked on the album with Shaquille O'Neal. So he did a lot of work during that time as well. So he had those experiences working with other artists. The Fugees, Black Eyed Peas. So yeah, he continued to work with a lot of people, Busta Rhymes.
Here a connection, if I may, and again, jump in. I'm gonna keep doing this with y'all, and thank you, EJ, for leading by example. Let's jump in. The connection that I hear in what we were just naming before around Phife navigating his illness and in navigating the dismemberment of Tribe Called Quest. You actually write about this too on page 65 for those of us with the book around, and the Tribe Called Quest disbands. You just say one word, but I'm gonna expand on it. What I hear is this ultimate liberation, right? Like there are obstacles in Phife's way, obviously, and they're very painful to navigate, but there seems to be a freeing sense almost to then go on and do all these other things and to cultivate the art in maybe ways that would have been stagnant if maybe perhaps he didn't move that way. And even in knowing that he was able to work really hard in the last 2 weeks of his sickness, I hear a liberation and a freedom in that, a sense of, and I'm not trying to glorify, but just a sense of perhaps, I'm gonna give this my all.
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons why I'm only gonna speak for him. The others have their other stories, but this is one of the reasons why he was so angry, is because they were talking about doing solo projects, working with other artists, and they kind of agreed to like push the new album and then take that break, because by then that was their 5th album, if I'm not mistaken. And Q-Tip dropped them a letter saying that he, was going off on his own, and just several weeks later, he dropped a solo album. So, you know, if you are on your job for 20 years and they say when, you know, the company is closing down and then the next few weeks they've hired somebody in your place and it's blooming, that would be pretty difficult. And like I said, you know, Malik was the sweetest man you'd ever meet, but he did not take any crap. So
Yeah.
he felt like, you know, they all could have agreed just to move along, work with other people and come back together if they liked. Now, for many years, they came back together. They headlined different tours. Tribe Called Quest was really always in demand.
Absolutely.
I think JN has she has her hand up. He or she has her hand up.
Was there a hand up? I'm sorry. JN, feel free to.
JN?
Feel free. Jill Newman, I believe. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Or we can just keep going.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a comment,
Yes.
or I guess it's kind of a question. You talked about the different relationships that you had, mother, son, artist to artist, teacher to friend. How easy was it for you all to switch to the different aspects of your relationships?
You mean to switch like from mother to son to artist and artist? It was just ever evolving. It was ever evolving. Like, for example, we both agreed that we would not censor each other's work.
Okay.
So there was a time in New York when I would say that I had a bit of celebrity myself in the New York community with my poetry.
Oh, how humble,
Huh?
y'all. How humble.
Well, I've worked like a dog for it.
Exactly.
I can tell you.
So it's not a bit, it's a lot. Let's praise that and name that. Yes.
Yeah, you know, so Bob Holman, who owned the Bowery Poetry Club,
Yes.
began these, what would you call them? He began this like something like verses, and he would have poets and rappers come together and go at it. And so a couple of times he had Malik and I, we were at the Fez, we were at House of Blues. So it would unfold easily. He would call me to talk to me about a piece that I was doing, or he'd say, when I start this month, join me on here and say such and such, you know. So our relationship was like that. And I was really learning so much from him, because he would say, what? They're paying you what? Oh no, don't take that. Don't even take that gig. You know, so this is how he was the teacher.
Exactly. That is wonderful.
Yeah. And also, I had it when I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, it wasn't like I was 15, or it wasn't like I was 25 years older than him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I wanted to be his parent, but also his friend. And he was an only child. So sometimes when you have an only child, you get a little closer. Sometimes, not always.
I had a comment, Cheryl.
Yes.
You are taking me way back to when analyzing rap, seeing the poetry in it, the aesthetics in it, was popular with English college teachers. You're taking me way back, Cheryl. And I remember analyzing some aspect of A Tribe Called Quest. I really don't know what it was. KRS-One, we
Yeah.
did a presentation. I mean, we did a research presentation, and I remember reading the lyrics to A Tribe Called Quest and coming up with rap being rapid application of politics. RAP, rapid application of politics. You just bringing back my memory. Oh, I got to read the book. Oh, I got to.
I like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, KRS-One, genius. What a genius. Biggie Smalls, Nas. Oh, those people. You can never forget them from the 90s era.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, so once a tribe starts to make albums early on in their career, and all these different people, all these different well-known rappers are coming into your house, did you have a sense of how big a Tribe Called Quest, or how influential they were and are? Or did it feel like just a bunch of Malik's friends sort of coming into the house, making music?
Yeah, I did not have any idea of how they would change the face of music. But what I knew was from the first album, People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm, they were having fun. They always wanted to have fun. But remember, they were early teens then. So they were just having a good time. Now, when the documentary came out, I, for the first time, found out he was going to this club and that club and rapping here and there. I didn't know any of that really, because, I mean, he was said to his dad and I that they needed money to go to the studio. And the way we thought about it was good. That way they won't be on the street. So they would go to the recording studio and they would be there all day. And we really saw it as them having something to do, because, you know, in those years you were scared of your boy children just messing around in the street. The police, gangs, all those things. A parent had to deal with that back then too. So we were paying attention, but, you know, he would play something for us, but we were trying to work and go to school at the same time. So we weren't like in his face to see what every lyric was. And if there was a curse, that was my mother's job. That was my mother's job. She was so worried about those things, and we were not. We were just happy for them to be off the road. So no, we did not know how big they were going to become. But when Busta Rhymes and this one and that one was coming in the house, we started getting a sense
Got a
of
little
it.
clear. Especially if Busta Rhymes is in your house.
Oh, yeah.
Mama Phife, I want to name, in the book, you've chosen a really select but really, really interesting and precise photos. After page 98, I would assume it's starting on page 99. They're beautiful photos, and thank you for these insights, but I was just wondering, maybe you could talk to us about one or two of them. Which are the ones that you see that just bring you absolute joy? I know we sat here and we went through one by one.
Yeah, the first 2 pages with me kissing him on the bed. He was my little sweetie. And then that other one with him sucking his finger, he did nothing without sucking his finger. And then his dad and I with him. Yeah. He was happy. We were raised in a wonderful family. And then that one on the back step with he and I, we were on the back step. He was sitting on my lap. And Cheryl Clark said to me, well, why are you so serious? My goodness. And it was serious business raising a child, because I think there I was maybe 22 or 23. So, you know, I was in school and trying to put money together and taking out student loans. And so it was a very serious time.
Yeah, those are beautiful. So the ones, of course, more that lean toward youth and his youth and even your youth, it seems that it leans in that.
Yeah, because that was basically the hardest time of our life, but it was also the sweetest time, because his dad and I, you know, were together raising him.
I would like to touch upon that we did speak about in our book club discussions as well, that we notice your absolute raw transparency around whatever sort of difficulties and relationships you may have had with Malik's father, particularly how those things how they may have shown themselves after his passing. And I don't know if I have a question, maybe just more of I'm saying thank you for being that honest and transparent, because I think we all relate. I think we all understand, and maybe we can't, right? We can't understand how complicated it could be to try to maintain whatever that sort of relationship is at the loss of a child. And I just wanted to know, in the tribute to your son, why did you choose to be so honest around some of that stuff that clearly wasn't pretty or okay between yourself and Malik's father?
Well,
And unless you want to, you don't have to.
No. I'll tell you. I'll tell you a little bit about that. He was not. We divorced when Malik was about 15, and after that, he was not as involved. He was not an involved parent, and it made me very angry because he had promised me that we were going to rear this child together no matter what. So it feels to me when things got really hard, he wasn't there. And when Malik went through all of his sicknesses after 20, you know, I was there. I mean, putting my own self on the side. And so when he took a picture of Malik in the casket, it angered me. So I think that was the angriest I was. But I've come to realize in the last 5 years that I was so hurt and so mad that I lost him. I needed somebody to take it out on.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that happens, you know. But what's more than that, his wife and I had done everything to make the funeral service secret. We did not put it anywhere. There was no mention of where it was going to be. And he knew this because we were afraid that someone would take pictures of him in his casket and leak it to the internet. That was our biggest fear. And I couldn't see my daughter-in-law going through that. I mean, she was really broken. They had been together about 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just couldn't see her going through that. So as soon as I got to the funeral parlor, my friends were saying, his dad has been taking pictures of him. Oh my God. And so by the time I wrote the book, within the next 2-3 years, I put it out. I had to put it out there. But the funniest thing was I signed some books, and I signed one for him, and my partner mailed it to him. So, and I hadn't told him, you know, but I called him and I said, I have to be honest with you. Let me tell you, this is in the book and the reason why. And, you know, it was hard to do that. And he said, well, you know, I really appreciate your honesty. You know, it hurts me a little, but I know, you know, the things we were doing and the way we were living. So I'm sorry, you know.
Well, I thank you for even delving even more into it. I'm not going to say that we sat here and speculated, but I think as a book club, particularly that we're based in the Bronx and majority Black and brown people, we're like, yeah, wait a minute. If someone did that to, you know, we just tried to put ourselves in these situations, that anger would also be there. And I think,
and it was also such a public mourning that was hard in itself. Honestly, we got so much love from everybody, but it still was difficult. And that was our greatest fear, that TMZ would have it. As it was, they had been calling us and trying to get interviews.
Right. You have a poem here on page 82. I mean, I wonder if you have your work in front of you, but I know you do. On page 82, blueberry yogurt. I think it's written so precisely, so beautifully. I'm wondering, would you be able to read it for us in this moment and maybe talk a little bit about why you wrote it? This is literally one of my favorite pieces in the book.
Oh, okay, sure. Blueberry yogurt. Malik was shopping in the supermarket near his home when a white man cut the line and jumped in front of him. At first he was frustrated, but waved him on to go ahead. The man seemed irritated and started an argument with him. He called him stupid. Malik ignored the man. But the guy continued his tirade about niggers not thinking they're so privileged and nigger out of their place. As he was walking away, Malik reached in his cart and took out a yogurt and threw it at the man. It hit him in the neck, a blueberry yogurt missile. The man held his neck and began to howl. When he told me this, I thought I would die, but he was still upset. In a second flat, Malik was out of there in his car and on his way home. Upset and frustrated, he called me. I tried to keep my voice casual as he told me. Then I broke out in uncontrollable laughter. Before long, he was laughing too at the sheer absurdity of this encounter. Mr. Blueberry Yogurt. Because, you know, he lived in Oakley. They lived in Oakley, California. And, you know, lots of privileged whites.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting snippet, though, because if you can, what are you trying to tell us, particularly about the dynamic between you and your son in sharing that small story, that encounter that really you weren't necessarily there for? Why put that in the book? Why share that with us? What does that signify?
Because even though he was Phife Dawg and loved all over the world, some white man in the store didn't like him and didn't care who he was. Mm-hmm. He jumped in front of him in the line and he expected him to get up and go away. And Malik was so frustrated, the only thing he could do was throw the yogurt at him. I also wanted to show that, you know, he could be hot-tempered and angry too. He wasn't, you know, like this good boy that you could walk all over. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, maybe somebody else would have just cursed, but before he knew it, he was throwing the yogurt at the man.
A yogurt to the neck.
And so I wanted to show that he wasn't so innocent, or everything wasn't always so good in his world, you know. That he also was persecuted by white people. Mm-hmm. You know, like at one time he told me, you know, he was on the plane coming home. He was in first class and this man refused to sit near him. He wanted Malik to get up and take one of the other single seats. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's always this racism and prejudice, and you never know to whom you're speaking. So he went through some of those. He went through some of those things as a Black man, and I really wanted to put that in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it fit perfectly for me. It's a small snippet, but it is really one of my favorite pieces. I mean, aside from
I have a question. It seems like Phife was ill almost his entire Quest career. Like, is that the case? Like from the very beginning? Because you had reference, like when he was 18, he first had the bouts with his kidney, and he couldn't have been much younger than that when he started with the Tribe Called Quest.
He really found out that he was a type 1 diabetic during the first album. Mm-hmm. They were on tour, and he found out, and he kept, well, I had always told him what the symptoms were and why I was taking certain insulin, certain medication. So he came home and he said to my mother, who was a nurse, he said, I think I have diabetes. This was on the first album tour. Mm. And my mother said, why? And he said, because I'm having trouble seeing. So she tested his sugar and it was very high. So she raced him to the doctor and they put him on insulin that day. So for a long while, you know, he traveled with his insulin, and then he had to go on dialysis after a number of years. And rather than staying home and doing hemodialysis, he decided he would do peritoneal dialysis, which is where you cleanse your own blood, but you have to do that 4 times a day. And I believe that being on the road, not eating properly, and dialyzing 4 times a day was one of the things that pulled his body down. But I must say that he was born with the kidney condition. When he was born, he had a twin brother, and his kidney was half the size of the normal kidney. So he always did have a kidney condition, which was what flared up, and that was the end of his life. His kidney just gave out. So he had it for a long time. There were good years though on the road when he was managing his own diabetes with insulin and medication, but then there were other times when he wasn't eating properly. He liked Dr. Pepper. He says that in his lyrics.
Yeah. How was this, or how did your son affect your poetry production? I mean, because oftentimes, throughout this conversation, it kind of focused on your influence on your son, but how did he, if any, did he influence your work? I've known Cheryl, I don't know, how long have I known you now? Maybe 15 years.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
a long time. Since you had the little bookstore
Right.
down in the East Village.
Well, no, that's a whole other story. But that wasn't me. But other people think it was me. But that,
oh, come on.
no, that wasn't me. But I was just wondering, like, do you feel like your work developed because of your son's work?
No, I think my work developed because I had married so young and had a baby when I was 19. And I did not know marriage was so hard. So, I would tell my husband about it. I didn't like to clean, and I didn't like to do all of these things. I'd rather be writing, and it would hurt his feelings after a while. So I started writing all of my feelings. I started writing in a journal and writing poetry. So I would say that my writing came out of a need to express myself, a need to understand myself better. It first came out of frustration. And so I started writing then. And then I would write poems for Malik, poems for my mother. I began writing family poems. So I would say, yes, some of the work was around his life and him being my child, but most of my work is about being an immigrant, leaving my family in Trinidad, leaving my culture and my language and my dialect. And of course it turned into joy and sexuality and becoming a lesbian, so these are all the things that's in my work, honoring my parents and my friends. And so it has been a long journey of self-discovery through writing.
In that same token, I'm so curious, because I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in it. In this piece, in this book that you've created, it's so much more than a book. I call it an archive. In this archive, you do show us many of those complex, different forms. I think we see these expansions of the writings in which you just named now with Ron. And something that I see is you use poetic form that varies. So we have lists, we have prose, you genuinely have like notes and texts. I believe there are text messages in here.
Yes.
Definitely photocopied notes. So I think my question is a two-part question. First, just for Cheryl, what is Cheryl's favorite form poetic form? Where do you feel most comfortable? What sounds right to you, particularly because your son is one of the greatest hip hop artists to ever touch a mic. So I'm just wondering, where does that music sort of live in you? And then the other question I have is, to me, lists speak very appropriately to grief, right? As the poet, I'm also a poet. Sometimes EJ is our resident poet, we know that. Sometimes when we're experiencing really deep pain or emotion, we don't have the poetic observation. We can just name what it is, right? The black chair, the dark moon, the sun, the depth. So I'm just wondering, how do those lists work with the grief that you're writing about? Because I see those connections and they really pop off the page for me. And the other question is, where are you most comfortable, given that you are Mama Phife? Where's your most comfortable poetic form?
Right now, and for the last 10 years, it has been the Zuhitsu.
Ooh.
My poem, The Apricot Begonias, which is a long poem, is a Zuhitsu. A Zuhitsu is like a patchwork quilt, yes. It was the hardest poem to write in the book. It took me the longest, and that is the form I like, because I allow my brain and my body and my grief or loss or joy or sexual joy to just roll into one like a steamroller. I don't stop myself from whatever is coming up. And the poet that I learned the Zuhitsu from is a poet by the name of Kimiko Han. She's Japanese American. And the Zuhitsu is a Japanese form from the 10th century. And
Wow.
there was this, this countess, her name is Saishanagon. She would go into the court. She didn't need to work, but she took a job in the court so she could do observations. And all day she observed people and wrote whom she liked, whom she did not like, you know, whose hair was ugly or beautiful, and she would write all day and go home and put those notes in her pillow. Hence the pillow book. If you've heard of the pillow book, that is the one that really started the Zuhitsu writing form. And so I love that form because I can wield anything in there. It's like cooking the Trinidadian dish called pilau, where you put rice and peas and corn and okra if you want to, beef and goat and shrimp. That's what the Zuhitsu is to me.
Wow.
It's a
Also,
pot you cook up.
It's a pot you cook up.
It's a pot you cook up.
And it's dinner time here. I'm like, okay, I'm about to walk to the Trinidadian spot when we finish this. Thank you very much. Wow. So that's really, I just want to name that I feel, am I dragging it? I won't say it like this, but I do feel a sense of freedom in that piece. And I think we had an earlier question with Liliana, was there hope and renewal there? Because it did seem like we were on a journey and you were just depositing, like deposits. And it feels almost, as the reader, we read it like this. Deposit through the stanza.
Yeah, it's a poem of joy and memory and beauty and hands-on, like the woman that gave my daughter-in-law and I the massage.
Right. And
we came out of there and there was that little baby just learning to walk and falling down, you know, so that was reminiscent of that little boy was reminiscent of what I was experiencing to work myself out of this grief.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there are many different things. I just love it because it's so challenging.
Yeah. It seems.
So that's my fun.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well then, so then you just spoke about grief a little bit. What I'm saying about grief and lists, does that resonate? Does that make sense? Were you like, you know, I actually didn't even think about those things?
Oh, not linked together like that. I love list poems because, again, they send me off in the same direction that the Zuhitsu sends me in. Something, it just gives me an opportunity to pull from everywhere, from every place I've traveled, every place I want to travel,
Right.
every place I've traveled with my mom or my son, you know.
Right.
I just love that. And somehow I just dig and dig and dig for these organic images and put them down, and they don't have to rhyme, they don't have to match, they don't have to link. I just love that challenge.
Maybe that's perhaps the thread I felt then. Just the image itself is organic, and that's why it pops out like that when you list it. Yeah, I definitely feel that.
I like it organic, unexpected. It's like, what? How do you get here from there? Oh my God.
Yes, it is wonderful. Well, I will name that we do have 15 minutes left as a group. And I was wondering, well, first let me open it up to the group, Miss Cheryl, before I ask you. Our beautiful book club, One Book, One Bronx. If you don't have any question, or maybe just you want to give love and praise to Miss Cheryl, is there any poems that we want to hear aloud that aren't myself or EJ reading it? Like we have the actual here. Or is there any poems that we're like, you know, I need to hear this? Take a moment, flip through your books. I have 100 of them, so don't make me ask her.
Oh, okay. I only want to say that I'm at somebody's house and I'm using somebody else's phone. So I'm willing to read like 2 or 3 poems, but I want to say, in case we get cut off, because this is somebody else's iPad.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. I was so honored to find out that you all were reading my book and discussing it. And I've never had that happen before. But, you know, like some teachers have taught my book in classes, but this book was so delicate and so sacred and such an archive that I've never felt this way about a book before. It was the hardest book to write. And let me tell you, the weeks before it came out, I was so nervous because it wasn't linear. And as I feel, grief is not linear. And so some people were saying, well, you know, 1 or 2 of the people I gave it to read, they were like, I don't know, it doesn't link up, and I didn't need it to link up. And so I was nervous about that, but
no, at all. I think as a book club, we were nervous, and we weren't nervous. I was nervous as a book club facilitator, and how do I facilitate a non-linear discussion? And I think almost immediately I see people nodding their heads. I think we were like, this book is so great because although we're in pieces, it feels way more linear. Because grief itself, love, life, joy, none of these things are linear. And I think we felt in the moments that you chose to cover and share with us. So I'll speak for the book club in that way. Thank you. And I do want to ask you one more question about the publishing, the curation process. This artist, Makiba, is a very good friend of mine. I think she's also a friend of the book club. She's a Bronx-based artist. Shout out to Makiba, you know, yes. And she actually is a very good friend of mine. We're very similar in age, we're babies. And when I told her that, well, she saw on my Instagram that we were doing this, and she was like, oh my goodness. And I just wanted to name, it's one of the most, besides your actual work, of course, one of the most enticing parts about this sort of book is that customized art that I saw that Makiba was able to do. And I'm just wondering, do you own this piece? Do you have it?
Yes, well, let me tell you a little bit about that piece, and shout out to Makiba, she's a genius.
Yes.
But that photo was one of the last selfies my son took. Wow. And when we were looking for work and people were charging, this one guy said he would charge me $5,000 to use one of Malik's photos. And wow. I was like, you must be mad. You should be paying me $5,000. So at that point, I was like, no, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to use anybody else's work. My daughter-in-law and I, we own the rights to the estate and the work. And when she sent me that one, she said, this is one of the last selfies that he took. I was like, I don't care what happens. They have to work that into the book cover. And they did. And she did an amazing job. Oh.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for speaking to
Yeah.
that. So yeah, people are saying, Paula, let her read her favorite. They're not saying it that aggressively. I just know that's what they really want. Let her read her favorite piece. I do want to name that Dr. Margaret Bristow did say, the use of the catalogs or the lists is seen in many of our classic American poems, Carl Sandburg, Walt Whitman, which is very true. And naming that those are like the patriarchal white bodies as well. So to see sort of the list poem used in this way is, for me as a younger person or whatever you want to call me, I know I look young, Miss Boyce, but they know I'm actually really 150 years old. But as a younger person, to see it in Black body and Black narrative, it really meant a lot to me. So I want to name that. Ron also in the group chat has popped Makiba's IG. Pick up your phones. It's @JustKeebs. Okay, he put it in the group chat. And I think because it's 8:20, it's probably best to end with Cheryl reading for us. So before I let her take away the floor, I just want to name that our next book club is going to meet on Wednesdays back with Casita Maria. And we're going to be doing When I Was Puerto Rican by Esmeralda Santiago. We have that again, same time, 7 to 8:30. It starts June, is that June? Yeah, June 2nd. And we're hitting every Wednesday. Until then, we have the link in the chat. Ron, is there anything else you want to mention? Oh, Ron just put it again. Is there anything else you want to mention before we let Cheryl end us?
No, that's it.
Right.
I'll just thank Cheryl now.
There we go. Cheryl,
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me
You better put on some lights in there, Cheryl.
I know. I don't know where they are. I just turned on my phone so I could have some light.
Oh.
Okay, that's better. So I'm going to read Hand of the Midwife. My grandmother was a village midwife. It's on 81. Not certified, she delivered babies, shaped heads, broke fevers, flowed milk, buried umbilical cords, and blue babies. A mix of blue cohosh, raspberry leaves, clary sage, skullcap root, viburnum opus, golden seal. My grandmother's right hand was a sure shot. It patched broken hearts, dried turmeric leaves to improve digestion, boiled tamarind leaves to treat jaundice and diabetes. It scrubbed and ironed until it was stiff and sore. Grandmother Ada, what medicine plant can I boil for this wounding?
Yeah, I better see little hand motions. You better be clapping in silent. There we go. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, and one of the last ones I want to read, I really like this one too. I don't read it often enough. San Diego, 2015. For 3 months, Malik was telling me he had a special surprise for my birthday. I tried to squeeze it out of him, and each week his texts got more elaborate. I tried to get Disha to tell me. She would laugh and say that she didn't know what it was. Finally, December rolled around. I was thrilled and excited and just couldn't wait to be surprised. Then he called to say he could not give me my surprise because he had to perform for Busta Rhymes' 20th anniversary, and it was on my birthday. Oh, damn. I asked if he was going to tell me what the surprise was. He burst out laughing and said, Mom, I just wanted to spend some time with my girl, just you and me in my favorite city. I was taking you to San Diego so we could walk and talk, just you and me, like old friends. My heart opened wide and I teared up a bit. I told him how grateful I was to have him in my life, to walk this road as my partner and friend. He was so sweet and so thoughtful. My little Leaky, all grown up, surprising his mama. He assured me that he would find a new date as soon as he knew his schedule. San Diego was he and Disha's favorite city for quick getaways. They had planned a visit there for that coming spring to look at colleges with David and celebrate their wedding anniversary. 1 month after his death, I traveled to San Diego with my daughter and grandson to look at colleges. Clinging to each other, we watched basketball all night. That's what Malik taught us to do.
Oh. Folks, this was One Book, One Bronx with Miss Cheryl Boyce-Taylor. Thank you so much for coming again.
You're welcome. You're
Thank you
welcome.
all.